Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna bi fadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. So the number 9 then is facing the Qibla, right? It says except in this in the salah of which there is intense fear. So there's this diagram that I keep kind of bringing up in all of my classes, which is that we have a principle is that الضرورات تبيح المحظورات, that duress shall allow the sinful or allow that which is not doing that which is obligatory. So this is what we see here. You have to face the Qibla. What's an exception? Intense fear. Obviously, you are being shot at. You are running away from a pack of wolves. In that situation, you pray while running and while facing other than the Qibla, right? That's an issue of darura. So this is analogous to eating pork or drinking wine when other except when there would be um, death or the like in that situation, the issue of the darura. But the key concept is that the haram and the harm, the darar, right? These things, the mafasid, the things that the Sharia is trying to avoid, are not all the same. They're not all on the same level. And so harm or sin is of different levels, depending on how directly it touches the maqasid of Sharia, how directly it touches the things that the Sharia is trying to protect. Okay? And so there's different levels there. Similarly, then there's different levels of need. So here we say in the fard prayer, can I turn away from the Qibla? The answer is no. Can I please? No, 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 no. Okay, what if I'm in a life or death situation? Yes. Okay. So now then we come to says an exception. An exception is the supererogatory prayer. So now the harm is less. Why? Because this is a sunnah prayer, not a fard prayer. And so in a sunnah prayer, now what allows you to do the haram, i.e. pray other than the Qibla, is less, which is performed on a journey. And it's not just any journey, it is literally any journey. As long as you're outside of your city, outside of your village, right? You live in a tiny village of 15 houses and you leave that area and the area around it, the immediate things that people in that village would go to, then you're now a traveler and you can pray any direction. Right? So it is true when we say this, when we say duress shall allow the haram, right? It's not just duress. So difficulty, like recurrent, widespread difficulty, or other things can also change the haram to halal on the assumption that it's a less level, right? So an example of this then is a woman traveling without a mahram for need. Okay, so what's the difference between a woman traveling without a mahram is haram. A man touching a woman is haram. Are they the same level? No, they're not. So for a man to touch this woman, I'm going to need a life or death situation, right? Or genuine harm, like there's no female doctor to touch her. It's going to have to be, etc. So it's an issue of genuine, realized harm. Whereas in order to give a fatwa that this woman can travel by herself, I'm going to say the woman, she's traveling by herself and there's no fitna and she's safe and there's a pressing need for her to travel. Okay, go ahead. There's a pressing need for you to travel. Okay, right? So can we see that? How the harm was less, so then the need or the hardship that was needed to allow it was less. Does that make sense?
Yes, Sheikh.
Right. And so it's in reality it's a graph, right?
Ustad,
Yes, go ahead, Sister Yusuf.
could you could you go ahead and provide one more example of what you just shared around harm when
Another
the harm is less?
yeah, the harm is
Hmm.
less. Um, harm is less. Okay. Uh, a man um, uh, 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 um, exposing your awrah. Okay, so why is it haram to expose your awrah? Is it haram to expose? I'm trying to think of something else that's not related to that. I want to think about a better example. Um, um, uh, think something else that's not related to that. Okay, um, having a debit card versus having a bank account in a conventional bank versus getting involved in interest. Okay, so if I put my money in Bank of America or HSBC, then I am indirectly helping sin. Well, actually, I'm directly helping sin in reality because I'm lending this bank, this conventional interest dealing bank, I'm lending them money by opening a bank account with them. Okay. And I know that they use that to lend out to other people to do interest. So I am helping them do haram, right? I'm helping them do haram. Is that haram on the same level as getting a credit card and getting a credit card and agreeing to potentially pay interest? No, it's not. Okay, what about getting a credit card and actually paying interest? No, it's not. So there's three levels of haram there. They are all haram. Having a conventional bank account, haram by default. Having a credit card, just the fact you have a credit card and you've signed a contract that you are willing to pay interest, that's haram. And dealing interest is haram. Okay? But now, what would allow me to do each of these three things is not the same. So you say, Fareed, my son has an operation tomorrow morning. I'm traveling. I don't have access to money. I've asked to borrow here. I have to do this. It's a $10,000 operation tomorrow morning. I have to do it. The only way I can do it is use this credit card. And I will not be able to pay it back by that time. I will try my best, but I won't, probably will not be able to do it. So I will end up paying interest. I say, go ahead, Bismillah, because this is an issue of duress. Your son has to do the operation tomorrow morning, otherwise he will die. Go ahead. So what allowed you to actively get involved in interest was life or death scenario. Okay. What about that which allowed you to potentially get involved into interest? Right. So some modern scholars, not all modern scholars, but some modern scholars will say it is halal to have a credit card on the proviso that you are confident that you don't pay the interest on it. Okay, there's no interest you're actually going to pay because you live in the West and there's a general need to have a credit card, right? It could happen with a business as well. I don't know, but maybe a business credit card, for example. There's certain things that the business can do with a credit card that it couldn't do with a debit card, etc. Okay, so that's a level that's below that. You don't need the same kind of issue, life or death scenario, right? And then a level that's below that is, I mean, okay, so having a debit card. How many Islamic banks are there in your country? None. Okay, how many? So, and so I don't have an Islamic bank to deal with. So basically, I couldn't get paid. I couldn't buy anything. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do any transfers. I couldn't receive my salary. Okay, so then we have widespread difficulty. Go ahead. Bismillah, open up, go into that that bank, open a bank account, make sure there's no interest there. But you are involved in the haram, but it is because of a widespread difficulty that applies to you, me, and everybody. Okay, so we have three level. They're all haram, but they're not on the same level haram. Based on the different levels, there will be different pressures that will allow you to get into that haram. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Right. And then there are certain things that it doesn't matter what happens, you can't do. Right? Could you kill somebody at gunpoint? No, you couldn't. So there's actually no pressure that is great enough for you to allow somebody to kill somebody else. Right? I mean, just as murder, you couldn't do that. Um, yeah. So this is a recurrent system again and again and again, right? That we see again and again. Um, Another example which is kind of through qiyas, right? So we know that the fuqaha they mention, so the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that it is haram to dye your hair black. Can't do that. So they say, but yes, you could do that. You could do that if in the context of jihad, where, for example, there are where in the context of jihad, and it makes the Muslim soldiers look younger, right? So the soldiers, they all look younger now because they have black hair, and so the enemy is now scared. So is that duress? It's not duress, right? But it's widespread benefit, right, that you can achieve, and that might have changed the tide of war, right? And so some Shafis they say that also applies to a woman. A woman could dye her hair specifically black, even though the Prophet forbade dyeing your hair black for her husband, right? And so it's an issue. So they're dealing with, when they're looking at dyeing your hair black, they're looking at why, how does that fit in? How bad is it? Right? It's bad, it's haram, but how bad? And therefore, how much need would you need to do that? So a woman dyeing her hair black is not an issue of life or death, right? Why can't you dye her hair another color? Like she's having gray hair, why can't you just dye it brown or something like that? It's not an issue of life or death. So that's why, and it's debated in the Shafi school, but it again, it's a lesser level. So there's this nebulous, I remember having this discussion with my teachers, Sheikh Abdul Rashid, and he said, yeah, sometimes need is the same as duress. I'm like, I don't get it, but that's because I didn't really click in my head that whole system, that there's different levels of haram and different levels of pressures, right? And this is one of the problems again that what you'll see is, so for example, some modern scholars who say in the West you can get interest on your first house because there is a need for Muslims to have property. Um, you know, it's where's an analogy? The Prophet ﷺ, for example, he forbade selling dates for uncured dates, right? So what they would do is you have a date palm, you have a date palm. Its dates are ripe now. You haven't been picked, and they haven't been picked yet, so you don't know exactly. And you're gonna basically sell them as they are for dates. The Prophet forbade that because you're exchanging like for like, dates for dates or gold for gold, and you don't know that they're exactly the same weight or volume. So you can't do that because it's going to be a different weight and volume once they're cured. But the Prophet allowed a small amount for certain people in need, right? So that the Prophet didn't allow riba, he allowed something that could potentially be riba, right? Because in a small amount for a need, right? And so there's a big difference to allowing something like a credit card for somebody. I want to buy a credit card because I know that I can have more strength using Visa or Maestro, and I can actually get my money back, and I can do things much more than I could do through the debit card or whatever benefits there are on a credit card. That widespread need to get involved in something that is potentially haram is not the same as that is, or not potentially haram because of what it could potentially lead to, versus haram because it leads to something haram, right? Like a man and a woman being alone in a room is haram. A man and a woman committing zina is haram, but they're not the same level, right? They're not the same level. A man and a woman being alone in a room, a man and a woman being in a classroom together when there's other people there and there's potential fitna. It's not the same. And so the pressures that we're going to use at different times to allow certain things are not going to be the same. But sometimes the judgment is not really, obviously we're going to disagree on judgments. It happens, we disagree. But sometimes the judgment is just really off and it doesn't make any sense. Is that exactly as Sister Yusuf?
Yes, yes. And for clarification, when you say darura, you said that can be either harm,
So that's going
pressures, or duress.
to, so when we say
It can
darura,
mean any of those.
when we say darura, we're talking about duress itself, which is I'm going to
Duress.
die.
Okay.
I'm going to go insane. I'm going to lose
Okay.
my faith. I'm going to lose my property. I'm going to lose my I'm going to lose my children, and or not know who my children are, or my children will not know who I am. So there will be lack of clarity in lineage or sexual abuse. So those are kind of the same. They're the kind of one. It's called ayard in Arabic. So though one of those things is going to happen or very likely going to happen,
Okay. So
right?
it's the
So what's
highest
the
level.
darura?
Is that
That's a
correct?
very high level. Yeah, that's a very high level. And then you have below it, you have haja, which is difficulty, but that varies
Hmm.
drastically depending on how close it is to duress, how widespread it is, etc. So I'll give you an example. Um, I am going to die, okay? And so I have some pork. How much pork can I eat? The absolute bare minimum, okay? The absolute bare minimum, because all I can do is remove the actual immediate life or death scenario by eating, let's say, for example, a tablespoon of pork, right? This
Hmm.
now saves me for, I don't know, gives me X amount of calories. I can survive, for example, another half of the day or whatever it is, okay? Now, when we increase the difficulty by making it widespread, it's not just me, it's all 10 of us. 10 of us are on an island or on a ship, and there's no halal food. And all 10 of us are trying to solve this problem of getting to land. Okay? Now, because the duress is worse, we're actually allowed to eat more. We don't have to just eat the bare minimum. We can eat a little bit more. So what's happened is as the harm has increased and become widespread, right? Then suddenly the we can get involved into the haram more because the pressure is higher, right? Um, so it varies a lot, right? It varies a lot. Something the difficulty, how close it is to duress, how hard it is. It will change. Somebody we mentioned about a woman traveling. So they said, okay, what if a woman it was not safe? Could you travel alone? So yes. Okay, when? She's running away from the enemy. So she was imprisoned by the enemy, right? She was not safe
Hmm.
with the enemy. She was imprisoned. She managed to break out of that prison and then run across some country. She's not safe where she's running, but she's more safe, right? Or potentially more safe, right? And so she has no mahram and she is not safe, but at least she's now at least more safe, right, than she was before, right? And so these things they vary like that. And so the principle is al-haja tanzilat manzilat ad-darura. Difficulty shall be treated as duress. So here's an example of it, that I'm allowed to turn away from the Qibla because of a difficulty, right? I don't have to pray, do I? I mean, I don't, why am I, it's not, there's no darura to pray, sunnah prayer, right? So what's the issue? There's no duress? I'm not going to die. Here I'm going to die. If I pray as I'm supposed to, I will be shot at. I will get eaten by this animal. I will get trampled by these elephants. I will get whatever the volcano will eruption will get me, whatever it is. But here there's no duress, but because it's less of a problem, and so there's less of a need to make it halal, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, you said so when it's less of a problem, there's less of a need
Exactly.
to make it halal.
Hmm.
Okay,
And
I
so,
understand
so
now.
the key concept is haram is not all the same. Difficulty is not all the same. It's so there's a scale of difficulty and a scale of harm slash haram slash sin. It's not all the same thing, right? So we have to judge these things get judged together, right? And so in reality, what we see here is a lot of these judgments are being made by the fuqaha. They're making an estimation, right? So they're going to say if one
Mhm.
is in a vehicle or a boat, right? Here they mean a large vehicle. So you're on a large vehicle like a ship, like a coach, greyhound, like an aeroplane. One completes one's bowing prostration and faces, i.e., you have to face the Qibla. So they're saying when you're on a large boat, the difficulty is not there. The difficulty is negligible. We're treating this as not very significant difficulty. So you have to pray normally. So on an airplane, you have to pray normally, right? If
Hmm.
one isn't in a vehicle or in a boat, uh, so when I mean vehicle, I mean large vehicle, or on a boat, another large vehicle, then if one is riding, I in a small vehicle, like a car, like a motorbike, like a bike, like a skateboard, I don't know, right? One faces at the ihram only if it is easy on him, right? Notice here, only if it's easy. So why are they saying that? Why is it? I mean, either you'd imagine if I either have to or I don't, it's either impossible or it isn't. But it's not like that because I'm praying a sunnah prayer, so the harm is less, and I'm praying lots of sunnah prayers, right? So the harm is the need is more. MashaAllah, every day I prayed 300 rak'ahs, MashaAllah, on my skateboard from one town to another town. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, right? So is the harm is recurrent. The difficulty is recurrent, right? The need for it is higher, and so there's more ease. Whereas praying the fard, it's less recurrent. The harm in not praying the fard properly is greater, and so the pressure is less. The harm is more. You can't do it. The fard has to be prayed properly. Okay, so if one is in a so on a small vehicle like a car, like a motorbike, like a bike, like a skateboard, like a scooter, like or whatever else you could be on, if one is riding, one faces the qibla, faces the at the ihram only at certain times, right? So it's less only if it is easy. So if it's not easy, for example, the qibla is behind you, you don't have to turn around. Right? The remainder of the path is the qibla for the remainder of the prayer. So now you're driving, doesn't matter which direction you're in, it's fine. The rider, i.e. the person driving the car, motorbike, etc., bike, bends for bowing and the prostration even more. If one is walking, okay, now it's slightly easier. One faces in ihram, so now you have to stop. So you're not on a horse, you're not on a car. You have to, so you're walking. It's easy to stop, right? Turn around, face the qibla, say Allahu Akbar. And then you turn back and do your Fatiha and Surah and do whatever you want, and then stop, turn around, do the bowing, stop, turn around, do the prostration properly, right? Sit between the prostrations. When you're standing, then you are standing. You are walking around in your qiyam. So the longest part of the prayer when you're doing the surahs, that's when you're walking around, right? Does that make sense? Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes, Sheikh.
Okay. So another concept is that when we're judging difficulty, sometimes we're judging, particularly when we're talking about difficulty, not duress, right? Sometimes we look at your specific scenario and sometimes look at the general scenario. Okay. So here in the Shafi school, this is we're looking at if it is easy for you at this situation. So we're asking Bilal, right now you are driving. Is it easy for you when you're praying the Sunnah prayer in the car to turn away? Yes or no? If it is, you have to face the Qibla when you're doing the takbir, when you start the prayer. Otherwise, you don't. Okay, so we're looking at your specific scenario. In the Maliki school, that's irrelevant. They just say in a Sunnah prayer, you don't have to face the Qibla. Period. Right? In a Sunnah prayer while traveling, you don't have to do it. Right? So we have similar discussions in the Shafi school. Right? And it comes up again and again. Again, I am judging this haja. I am judging this difficulty. Am I looking how difficult it is for you today, or am I looking in general? Right? And it varies depending on how widespread it is. Depending on how widespread it is. Right? Um, so sometimes we just say, well, because it's widespread enough, even if it wasn't that difficult for you today, it's still overlooked. And other times we look at your specific scenario. Right? Hanafis, for example, they say you can pray with a small amount of filth on you, period. Just Shafis who say, no, you can't pray with a small amount of filth on you, only if it's difficult generally to avoid. So for them, they just say, well, filth, because it's been allowed in certain scenarios, it's just overlooked, just period, just because it's in general, right? But we would say, for example, you have some urine on your toe. Why do you have urine on your toe? One drop of urine on your toe, your prayer is invalid. Hanafi say, no, it's valid. Because they say, well, you could have a small amount of najasa on you in certain scenarios, so we allow it in all scenarios because it is in general difficult to avoid. And we say, no, it is not in general difficult to avoid. This kind of najasa in this kind of place is difficult to avoid. That kind of najasa is not difficult to avoid, so therefore it's not overlooked. So, repeating the concept, sometimes we're looking at your specific scenario when judging difficulty, and sometimes we're looking in general. When it comes to duress, it's not like that because duress is an issue of life and death for you right now. So that's different. Okay. Whoever prays inside the Kaaba and faces a fixed wall of its construction, right, or an amount of two-thirds of an arm's length, then one's salah is sound. So you go inside the Kaaba and you close the door, it's fine. You face any qibla, if you face any wall, you face any pillar, it's fine. But what if I faced, right? What if I faced the door while it was open and the lower ledge, the what's it called? The what's it called? The thing that you step the threshold, not really threshold, thing you step over. I forget, so the word escaping me now. The kind of so if you walk into a house, the thing that you step over when you're going into the house, don't know what that's called. Um, so if you can imagine that the door was not raised at all. So you prayed inside the Kaaba, facing the door, facing out of the door. So that's not going to count. But what if there was, what if the uh, what if the door was raised such that there was at least, what does it say? At least two-thirds of an arm's length, two-thirds of a cubit. So a cubit is about 40 centimeters. So about 30 centimeters approximately, right? So there's something about 30 centimeters tall, and you're facing the open door of the Kaaba. Now you're considered facing the Kaaba. But if it's less than that, you are considered facing outside of the Kaaba, right? And this length is the same thing for the sutra, right? In prayer and in when relieving yourself. You are relieving yourself in an open desert, facing the Qibla, and in front of you is a 1 meter object. Okay? Now you're considered not facing the Qibla. But if in front of you there's something that is half of a cubit, for example, 20 centimeters tall, that's not considered a barrier. You're now facing the Qibla. Similarly, you put a small uh, object in front of you, your bag that is 15 centimeters high in front of you. That's not considered a sutra. You don't have something in front of you. Whereas you put something that is 30, 40, 50, a suitcase on its side, for example, and this is now considered a barrier. Does that make sense?
Yes. Could I ask a question about the sitra? When
Yes.
you're in the masjid, the house of Allah, I oftentimes see ladies standing, putting something in front of them when they go to make their sunnah prayers.
hmm
Is it true that it's not required in
It's
the
not
masjid
required.
to have a
It's
sitra?
not. You're not obliged to do that. But the issue is people put a sutra, and the sutra only counts when there is no wall, or you couldn't access the wall. So what you should do is you finish the fard and you go
Hmm.
forward or you go sideways such that you are
Hmm.
praying in front of a pillar or in front of the wall, right? You have something that's
Okay.
mutanaqqib, something that moves. If there's nothing that could move, for example, all the walls are taken, okay, then you can now go to something that can move, like a chair, like those little stands, the little barrier things that they have. So the issue is people they go to the second option when the first option is valid, is available, and that doesn't count. So they don't actually have a sutra in front of them.
Okay. Alhamdulillah.
So
And then secondly,
basically the levels are firm, fixed thing like a boulder, like a tree, like a pillar, and then something
mhm,
that moves like a large animal, like a bag, like a car, something that moves. And then the third option then is a line in front of you, which is going away from you, not going, it's not perpendicular to the Kaaba, it's facing the Kaaba. So there's nothing to put in front of you, and there's just sand in front of you. So you just draw a line from you, away from you, towards the Kaaba, and that's your sutra, that's your barrier. So those are the three levels. So if you jump to level two before level one, it doesn't count.
Okay, for outside. I see. So if you're in the house of Allah and, for instance, they're praying Taraweeh and it's very, very full, and the only way to get to the wudu station is to go through the lines, is it permissible to walk in front of somebody who's praying in order to get to the
Um,
bathroom to
so
renew
I
your wudu?
so if it's obviously if it's an emergency, that's fine. If
Hmm.
they are praying next to an exit, that's a problem. Then yes, you can do that. So I'm just there praying my sunnahs, right? And I'm praying right in the exit. So I'm blocking
Yes.
anybody from leaving. Then you can go in front of me. Otherwise, um, you can't do that, no, because it's not. The issue with I'm blocking an exit is I've done something wrong. That's the whole issue, is that I've done something wrong by blocking the exit. But
Yes.
here is I'm not blocking the exit, and it's not an emergency, so you by default you can't go in front of me. So you're gonna have to wait.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I
that means you
understand.
can't go in front of me, meaning you can't go between me and the person in front of me. So the person in front of me is my sutra. So you can't. Does that
Oh,
make sense?
yes.
Right. So
Yes.
that
So it's better.
each row is a sutra for the person row behind. Now here's another issue. Again, this happened with the sisters, right? Particularly you have sisters that don't come to the masjid and aren't used to praying in Jama'ah. So what they do, they don't complete the rows.
Yes.
Right. So now she's praying, for example, right at the back, and she's praying Taraweeh with everybody else, but she's not in the Jama'ah. In that scenario, Allahu Alam, she doesn't have a sutra, and you can walk in front of her. Does that make
If
sense?
she's
So
not paying, so
let's say, for
if
example,
she,
there's three rows of sisters, and they are shoulder to shoulder, and they're completing the rows. And then some sisters at the back were like, "Oh, I'm just going to be at the back praying Taraweeh with the Jama'ah, but I'm going to sit next to my pray next to my toddler." Or I'm gonna just gonna sit next to the back because I might want to sit down now and then, and I don't want to move the chair. So she's sitting. She's not in the. She's in the jama'ah, right? But she's not
Mhm.
fulfilling the sunnah of the jama'ah, right? So in now that she's not shoulder to shoulder, she's not in the line. She's not on line with them. So now she's standing, and now you want to walk past her, right? Why do you, so the issue is she doesn't have a sutra now because she's too far away from her jama'ah. She doesn't have a sutra, so in which case you can walk in front of her. It is not sunnah to walk in front of her, but it is permissible to walk in front of her.
Okay.
Does that make
And
sense?
well, that makes sense. Alhamdulillah. And last question, which I find quite common here, is oftentimes the sisters are not encouraging, but they're pressuring each other to stand shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, move forward. Everybody, there's this certain energy here about. Is it a requirement?
You're in Kenya, sister?
Yes,
Yeah,
in
so
Kenya.
so foot to foot, I don't know if anybody says you should pray foot to foot because in the Shafi school, your feet so are supposed to be together as a woman, right?
Yes.
And also in the Hanafi school, I'm not sure about the Maliki school, but I've the Imam of my masjid is Maliki. I've never heard him say. So I think the thing about foot to foot is they mentioned that hadith is like mubalagha. It's like it's like kind of like hyperbole, right? That you're not literally foot to foot. Um, Allahu A'lam. I think this is just a Salafi thing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if any of the former Dhahib say you should be foot to foot. Allahu A'lam.
Okay. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Thank you
So is
for
there a lot of
clarification.
Salafis in Kenya?
In the city, there is a lot in the capital, but not so much on the coast
Right.
or outside
Yeah, Allahu
countryside.
A'lam. So, generally speaking, navigating Salafis, as long as it's what they say. So the methodology is off, but if they're agreeing to something that's within the form of their hip, then you should just, comply. Alhamdulillah, they're
Yes.
making a big deal about, let's say, for example, a man's trousers, like, oh, astaghfirullah, your brother, your trousers are below your ankles, and make a big deal about it. Okay, alhamdulillah, there is a, genuine argument for it. And so, comply, etc. Don't have to get into argument every 2 minutes. Somebody's asking you to do something that is fard or sunnah according to one of the form of their hip. Okay, it's fine. But if it's against all form of dhahib, um, I remember seeing a sister, subhanAllah, it's like a, yeah, I always thought particularly the Hanafi school was extremely, what's the word, misogynist, like it's like, women aren't supposed to recite aloud, the women are supposed to pray like this, pray like that, etc. It seemed like very kind of like funny. But I saw, I was teaching, and one of the classrooms I teach from is a masjid. So I was teaching, and then the sister, Salafi sister, she walks in, and she prays like Salafi style, and it was really ugly to see a sister pray like that, like feet wide apart, and kind of elbows out and kind of things. It's really not nice. Like it's not it's unbecoming a female to look like that. It looks very, very masculine, and
Mhm.
it was like disturbing. Um, so that's a key concept. Like the Salaf, they understood there's the hal of the prayer, and there's a way that a woman carries herself. And so a woman, women in the Shafi'i school, you feet are together, and for the Hanafis, for example, their hands are up. It's almost like a little, like an angel, like a, that's in the Western picture, looks like an angel, the way you have your hands on your chest, your elbows in, and you're kind of, it's a humility that is quite important, and it comes out in the prayer. Wallahu a'lam. But anyway, so I don't know. Maybe you can put the question if you're on the Q&A group, the Islam Q&A. You can put it there. Is it sunnah to pray heel to heel? Inshallah. Sorry, ankle to ankle, right? Ankle to ankle. Is that sunnah?
Mhm.
Inshallah, I'll research it if it's any other form of that. Say that. Inshallah. Okay,
Okay.
so now we're going on to another discussion here, which is very important, which is whoever is able to see the Kaaba should shouldn't imitate, i.e., should not do taqleed. So this is a huge concept. This is the Salafi methodology, which is correct. If you are able to see something, you can do it, then there's no taqleed, right? So this concept here is exactly the Salafi mentality. Why are you doing taqleed? Why are you Maliki, Shafi'i? That you have Quran and Sunnah, khalas, right? And this is copied and pasted from the books of Usul, 100%. There's no issue, right? So if you can see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, then you don't need to see somebody who's telling you about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If one is unable, one follows the words of a trusty person who informs him based on knowledge. This is exactly the same methodology. This concept here is fiqh and usul at the same time. So you do not rely on anything else if you have the Kaaba in front of you. If you have the dalil in front of you, you don't follow somebody else. You don't do that. Like I have the independent ability to, excuse me, to know what Allah and His Messenger have told me to do. Then khalas, I just do it. I don't need to ask anybody else. Right? Al-mujtahid la yuqallid. Right? Somebody, right? So actually, I'm not even talking about ijtihad. Here, somebody who knows, there's no ijtihad. There's no ijtihad, there's no taqleed. If you know what is right and what is wrong, then there is no ijtihad and no taqleed. That's why there's no taqleed in Iman. So why are you Muslim? Because Freed's Muslim. Okay, so if Freed was a Buddhist, you'd be Buddhist? Yes. That's not Iman, right? You don't do taqleed in Iman, right? In Iman, you say, is it true or is it false that Islam is true? You tell me. You work it out. There's no taqleed. There's no ijtihad and there's no taqleed. You don't just follow somebody else, nor do you kind of get to a position where it's most likely right. No, that's just right or wrong. Okay. If one is unable to find out where the Kaaba is, if one is unable to find out what the Shariah is, right, then one follows the words of a trusty person, thiqah, a reliable person, hadith. So I'm not alive at the time of the Prophet, hadith, right? Show me a sahih hadith. Trustworthy person who informs based on knowledge. So that person didn't do ijtihad. The person, right? So a hadith, the Sahabi is not doing ijtihad when he's narrating a hadith. The Sahabi is saying, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, and his student is saying, I heard the Sahabi say, etc. There's no ijtihad, right? So it's following a Sahih hadith. This is the same discussion. So this is discussion in usul that comes over there in Bab al-Mufti wal-Mustafti. We're talking about how does fiqh work and who do you follow, who doesn't follow, etc. And it's applied 100% here, right? If one is unable to, one follows the words of a trustworthy person who informs based on knowledge. That person has seen the Kaaba. So I can't see the Kaaba, but you can see the Kaaba. I haven't seen the Kaaba and you have seen the Kaaba. So yeah, I just saw the Kaaba. It's over there, right? But as opposed to a trustworthy person who informs him based on ijtihad. No. Okay. Why? Because it says, and if absent, there's nobody who can tell you what they saw. One exerts judgment according to proofs. So can you just follow someone else's ijtihad? No. Al-mujtahid la yuqallid. Somebody who is independently capable of making a decision that Allah has asked him to make cannot blindly follow somebody else. Right? And this is a key concept. Key concept. Right? So this is why a mujtahid, Imam Shafi, cannot just blindly follow Imam Malik. Right? That's why the Salafi movement is there, saying, look, if you saw the proofs, you wouldn't agree with the Hanafi school. So therefore, why are you following them? Right? So there is an assumption, though, that you are capable of doing ijtihad. Right? That's the caveat. But somebody capable of doing ijtihad, even on one issue, cannot follow on that one issue. If you, for example, this person, they spent the last 10 years researching a particular issue, and they know the proofs for and against it thoroughly, okay, then they are not going to do then they're going to do their own ijtihad. I'll give you an example of that with Sheikh Nuh Kala, for example. Sheikh Nuh Kala, he is somebody, he's somebody who studied a lot of fiqh and he wrote a lot of fiqh, but that's not his forte, it's not his thing. And he doesn't really care about it. He's not interested in fiqh in itself. He's interested in applying fiqh. He's interested in fiqh solutions for people, right? So he saw this continual issue about fasting in polar regions, right? Fasting in a place where there's no actual Isha and there's no beginning of Fajr because the sun never goes down far enough for Isha to begin and Fajr and there to be a pre-dawn period. So what did he do? Is he got the Shafi answer. This is the Shafi answer, and he said, "This is the Shafi answer. We do this." Okay. Thereafter, researched. Personally came to the conclusion that this is actually wrong for various reasons. So if you read his article on it, he'll say, I had previously said this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is wrong for two or three reasons. 1, 2, 3, 5. My answer is now this, right? So that's an example of that, right? And you see every scholar, like every advanced scholar, will have some level of ijtihad on a particular issue that they've spent a lot of time with, right? And they don't just blindly follow, right? And so I remember like Sheikh Yaqub Maikas, he was also talking about al-ikhtiyar, like when do you start having your ikhtiyarat, your own opinions? He says it's just a natural thing that at a certain point it just falls on you like this is obviously wrong, like you've looked at it from this angle, this angle. But these are on what we call ijtihad, mujtahid mas'ala on a particular issue as opposed to mujtahid mutlaq on every issue. It's totally different. So if absent, so there's nobody you can't see the Kaaba, nor can somebody who else can see the Kaaba, then one exercises a judgment according to one's proofs. Okay, so you do not follow someone else's judgment. So same thing in life. Why did you marry this person? Oh, the Sheikh said it was a good idea. So you weren't able to make the judgment yourself? No, I have no idea about anything. Right. So many people, what they do is they defer judgment to people who they shouldn't defer judgment to. The doctor said, I need to do this operation. Really? Did you? I mean, you got ChatGPT, we all got ChatGPT. You ask, is this a normal procedure? So the doctor told you to do something which was totally maverick. So not a normal operation to do. Right? You didn't have to have a PhD in medicine to find out this thing. Like you make a judgment. Should I live in a Muslim country or should I live in a non-Muslim country? Should I live in this country or that country? Should I go to Islamic school? Should I go to a Hifz school? Should I do this? You have kids? You tell me. So I said, oh, the Sheikh told me this, the Sheikh told me that. It's like, well, the Sheikh doesn't know your life, right? He doesn't actually know your life. He doesn't know the details of what's going on. And you do. And you're an adult and you have a brain and you can seek advice and make a judgment, right? So what people do is they do taqleed when there's no taqleed, right? They just defer to other people when they're actually capable of making a judgment themselves. And then they blame the other person, right? Happens in marriage all the time. Well, it's his fault. He's the one who advised me to marry her. Subhanallah, right? or whatever it is. I think that's wrong. You don't do that. So if you're able to make a judgment, Allah is asking you to use the academic, emotional skills that you have to make that judgment. It's your call. Don't blame anybody else. Now, if you're not able to do it, then you should not do it. So you either have to do your own ijtihad, you make a judgment and you follow it through, or you refrain from making a judgment, say, actually, I don't know the answer, right? It happens all the time. I get questions, for example, OCD questions. I'm like, brother, sister, I actually can't answer your question. Why am I doing an ijtihad when I don't have the expertise? I'm not a counselor. These are psychological problems you have, not religious problems. I can't actually solve your problem, right? So if you don't do taqleed, meaning defer to someone else's judgment, when you are incapable of doing a judgment, you're doing something wrong. And if you defer to someone else's judgment when you are capable of doing a judgment, you're doing something wrong, right? So so here's the issue with the Salafi movement is you've been sold an idea that you know, but you don't know. Just like a teenager, right? The teenager thinks they know, but they don't know. And then they realize later, right? So it's a teenager mentality, right? And there's there's a lot of Sheikh Yasir Qadi, he's written a book, it's coming out this year about Salafism, and kind of I think it's more like reflecting his personal journey, but that this thing about nuanced Salafism, right? Which in way everybody is a nuanced Salafi, right? Every scholar is a nuanced Salafi. We all want to follow the Salaf, and it's nuanced in that, we don't just follow every single thing in one particular book. Nobody does that. But after education. So the same thing, you have silly Salafism, which is Google the hadith, find the hadith, follow it, and then realize the hadith wasn't sahih anyway, or doesn't mean that anyway, right? And then there is nuanced Salafism, which is, benefit from the form of him and study a bit and come to a decision, right? The issue again with that is half the time they don't know what we're talking about either. But the concept is there. If you can make a judgment, you cannot defer to someone else's judgment. If you cannot make a judgment, you have to defer to someone else's judgment, right? Um, so it says, if absent, one exerts judgment according to the proofs, right? So this is an usuli issue, and this is a fiqh issue. If unable due to blindness in one's eyes or insight or sight, then one copies a knowing and trustworthy person. So this is the obligation. I don't know, is this hadith sahih or not? Ask a scholar. Does the hadith mean A or B? I don't know. So the issue is people are blind, but they don't know they're blind. That's the problem. So it's the blind leading the blind, which is problematic. But so when you're incapable, then they don't know what they don't know. That's a problem. So they don't. That's why they do. So one copies a knowledgeable, trustworthy person, taqleed, right? So this is all um, usul but directly usul um, and just applied here to this particular scenario, right? So the question is here: does an iPhone, a smartphone with a GPS, or is it considered knowledge, or is it considered proofs? So knowledge is I can see the Kaaba. Proofs is oh, we've been walking away from the Kaaba, so therefore the Kaaba must be behind us. The north is this way, so therefore this, right? So using a compass, is it or is it not knowledge? So they debate it, right? They debate it. But the north wind is blowing. I can see the North Star. Is that knowledge or is that an estimation, right? But with a GPS, right, it's slightly different. So with a compass, for example, your compass can be off. You beat the you move the compass around a lot. It is affected, for example, inside a building by the wiring of the building, etc. But with GPS, it's slightly different. But can GPS be wrong? I don't know if it can be wrong. Allahu A'lam. But if it can't be wrong, then it is knowledge. It's like seeing the Kaaba, right? And that is relevant in terms of qada or not qada. Inshallah, we'll talk about that. Um, we'll talk about this inshallah next week. Okay, sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad
The
wa ala.
same.
Yes, so
I had another question, but we can save
that's
it for
fine.
next week. My question was, when you are in the haram and your hotel is nearby, oftentimes they have prayer halls if you can't make it to the haram in time to make your prayers, like the
Yes.
Fard ones in particular. And in that case, because we're talking about seeing the Kaaba, you can't see the Kaaba when you're in the hotel. Of course, the windows aren't always, especially for the women. You can't see exactly you're
Yeah, but
relying on.
so the fact that they've built the place like that, that's not really taqlid because it's impossible that all of those people built the Kaaba and they built that prayer room in the wrong direction.
Okay,
As opposed to your
okay.
husband thinks the
Hmm.
Qibla is one way and you're saying the other way. And he says, well, you have to listen to me. You say, I have to listen to you in some things, but I don't think that's the Kaaba, the Qibla,
Hmm.
right? So it's very different to your husband, you and your husband traveling somewhere, and his phone says this, and your phone says something else, or his estimation is, as opposed to they've built a building right in the Haram or right in Mecca, and it's in the wrong direction. That's pretty unlikely. So
Okay,
they
so there
mentioned that
isn't
in
a
the
need
past.
to.
They say a mihrab that's been prayed in for a long time. So here's a masjid that's in some masjid somewhere in the world. That masjid has been prayed in for such a long time. You do not have to check,
Oh,
right?
alhamdulillah.
Because
Okay.
the default is that's the case. So, you look at the qara and you look at you look at the situation. In England, it's very different because you have lots of non-purpose built mosques. So you go in and say, oh, the masjid is built like this. Yeah, but you know that they're following the Hanafi school and you know that they're happy praying 30 degrees off or 20 degrees off, right? Whereas in Saudi, I think they're not really going to do that, right? They have the space, they have the means, they've built this thing, they've put a little line, they said the Qibla is here. It's not like it was done in a formal way with lots of people, and so you can by default rely on it, inshallah. Okay, we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam, subhanallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.